Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. Good evening and welcome to Smart Sustainability. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. What's happening in Afghanistan is a wake-up call around the globe from about every angle. The situation is extremely dire and seems to get worse by the day. Life and death for many people. A group that's particularly vulnerable and targeted are women and girls, along with everyone who was involved in education, human rights, and women empowerment efforts on the ground. Afghanistan has about 14.2 million women and girls. What's going to happen to them? What help can we give here? What are the options and possibilities for the people who need to flee? What does this backlash on Afghan women mean for sustainable gender strategies and a sustainable planet overall? Our topic tonight. The other group we want to talk about are veterans. Since 2001, between 1.9 and 3 million service members have been deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. 1.8 million veterans who served in Afghanistan have suffered disabilities for life. What the Afghanistan debacle means for veterans and how it might affect personal choices for the military going forward, our second topic tonight. Joining me here in the studio is Naveed Shah. He's a veterans advocate and veteran of the U.S. Army. He became an advocacy fellow with IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and works currently as an advocate at Common Defense. In 2016, he was invited by Michelle Obama for President Obama's final State of the Union address in recognition of his years of work on veterans issues. Joining us via Zoom is Peggy Clark, the incoming CEO and president of ICRW, the International Center for Research on Women, the world's premier research institute focused on tackling challenges facing women and girls around the globe. Peggy has a wealth of experience on global health and women's programs. Coming to ICRW from the Aspen Institute, where she promoted breakthrough strategies to combat challenges in global development. And we have Tahira Jersey. She served from 2004 and 2007 as Director General for Information and Public Relations in the Afghan Parliament. And she's today a volunteer at the Afghan, a board member and volunteer at the Afghan Academy, helping seniors in the local Afghan community. Thank you, all of you, to be with us tonight on this heart-wrenching and very pressing topic.
Well, thank you for having us.
Great to have you on. The situation is so dire and really seems to get worse by the day. So I do want to start with Peggy. Peggy, you're actively involved in helping women on the ground. What are you hearing? What's the current situation?
Thank you, Nicolette. And I'm sure Tahira has many of the same stories that I do, and I'm eager to hear your perspective, Tahira. Since the evacuation began on Sunday night, we have been 24/7 working to call members of Congress, to call former Secretary of States and others to support the threatening situation that women and girls are in Afghanistan. What we are finding is that women who were involved in supporting women's rights and also in girls' education are targeted by the Taliban. They have for some time, and their lives are really in danger unless we get them out of the country. The issue was initially the Biden administration was talking about just getting out of the country SIVs, which is special immigrant visas, people who were working with the U.S. military. But there is a whole other category of Afghans who need to get out of the country because they are being targeted for the work that they've done. And in particular, a very close friend of mine, her family has been stuck in Kabul, and they helped to create and found a girls' school there. And they are on Taliban lists, and we are quite worried about their lives. And so we've been actively working, Nicolette, to get them out of the country. And my understanding as of just this evening is that they actually made it inside the airport. They were taken to a safe house. And so now they are fortunately at the airport, but it's quite confidential. And what they had to go through to get there has been days and days of very serious worry. And it's the same for many hundreds of people who are trying to get people out of the country.
Yeah, that I can imagine that this, just getting, it sounds so easy on our end of the world here when we say, well, it's just getting to the airport, but that seems to be a huge issue for people. First getting to the airport and then getting through that zone to actually get on a plane, that's yet on another issue. It's really dire. Yeah. Yes, Naveed, you're nodding. Have you heard?
Yeah, I've heard very similar things from folks on the ground that they have been at the airport for some of them for days outside, just waiting to get in. There are groups who keep going to the airport, being turned back, going back again day after day, bringing their kids with them, bringing their luggage with them, bringing their personal papers and effects with them. Right now, what we're telling folks is that the paperwork that they have that shows that they used to work for the U.S. military is at the same time their ticket out of the country, but if the Taliban finds it, it's also their death warrant. So what are they supposed to do? Destroy it or take it with them? And it's so hard. They keep going back and forth. And groups like ICRW, the Evacuate Our Allies, the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Group have all been working really hard to get them the best information they can, but it just seems to come in drips and drabs, and nobody really knows exactly what to do or what the right path out is.
I imagine this particularly difficult to travel with children.
It's never easy to travel with children, but especially through this.
Yeah, Peggy, do you have any?
No, absolutely. And we heard today of a young toddler who was in the smush of people trying to get into the airport, was killed. I think what people are not aware of, Nicolette, it's not talked about enough in the general media, is people can't get to the airport because there are Taliban check stops. And so the US has control of the airport, but you cannot get through those Taliban checkpoints safely unless you have a military escort. And so this is a piece of the puzzle that they're not talking about very much. But if you are just an Afghan trying to get to the airport, you generally can't get through that Taliban checkpoint, and you need a military accompaniment. And I don't know if you're hearing about that, my colleague who's a veteran, but my understanding is that there are retired US military who are helping to get people through the checkpoints to the airport. And that's the only way to get out.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. There are a number of groups that are trying to coordinate this. I actually just heard from a former professor at the American University in Kabul, who obviously is trying to get out, and he was asking if we can connect him with a military person or somebody from the State Department even to help escort his family through that crowd. And it's just so hard. There aren't enough people on the ground there. I think at one point there were about 20 U.S. consular officers on the ground, and the plan was to get up to 40. But when you have thousands of people waiting to get out, I don't think that's going to be enough either.
So do we imagine this as, are there like small groups? Can that be organized so that there are small groups and then there is one military personnel with it? Or are we talking that every single person needs a military personnel to get to the airport?
It sounds like every group, or it could be groups, it could be individuals, but the problem is even if that's the case, there just aren't enough people or communications happening. People, I don't know if how well cell phones are working there or how comfortable people feel, because earlier reports said that the Taliban was looking through people's phones at the checkpoints leading to the airport to see if they had any messages in English, to see if they had any communications with Americans or State Department or military. And who knows what would happen to them if they found it.
Peggy, do we have an estimate of what percentage out of those 14.2 million women or girls in Afghanistan are actually really in acute, and I know they're all in danger, but like who really, what are we talking about in terms of who needs to get out?
Yeah, I think it's probably several hundred people. Every girl that is left behind is in danger of really not having any opportunities in her life for education or for the ability to work. And people are looking closely to see if the Taliban are going to allow the universities to allow girls to go back or for women to go back to work. but the general feeling is that they aren't. There's a massive effort, which is really quite wonderful, Nicolette, to support people to get out of the country and to expand visas so that more girls and women activists can be let out of the country. And what I would tell to our audience is there's a website called protectafghanwomen.org, and that is run by Georgetown University Center for Women, Peace and Security and Vital Voices. And they are really actively on the ground helping to get military to get people safely to the airport, and also helping to get charter flights and helping with resettlement of Afghans. So that is what I would suggest. Every bit helps. After the Vietnam War, 130,000 refugees came to the US. Right now, we only have room for a couple thousand in the US. So it's quite important for people to call their members of Congress to put pressure to allow us to avert this humanitarian crisis. And there is no question that it will be an absolute crisis with many, many deaths if we don't act right away.
So protectafghanwomen.org. So just for our viewers actually to remember, and we're gonna put this up at the end also, and you can also read up on our Facebook page where we're gonna push this out so that everyone, we do need your help, obviously. All those women and girls do need your help, but we're gonna talk more about what we can all do, because I feel that there are also things, you know, there's one thing of watching on television and holding your breath and being really shocked. There's quite another in getting in gear and doing something. I want to bring Tahira on. Tahira, you serve in the Afghan community. This is really, I mean, you're among those people every day. What is the biggest fear or the most talked thing right now in your community that you're hearing?
Well, the Afghan community, they are all very scared, frightened, angry, and disappointed, of course, after 20 years of making some progress, especially women and children in higher education, business, science, technology, everything. They went ahead a lot in every field, but all of a sudden seeing them going back, not even 20 years, maybe a lot more than that, make everybody angry, make everybody disappointed, frightened. That what is going to happen. Of course, it's not just the Taliban who came in. They were supported by other places. I don't know the Afghan community. If you have noticed or seen on TV, they are demonstrating, they are gathering, they are showing their anger, they are calling for justice. They are calling for the human rights, especially women's rights and children's rights. All these things are going on because they are extremely disappointed and angry.
Yeah. Now, you actually are in a situation where you can literally compare what it was like, Tahira, because you worked there for a time. And then you basically knew what it was like, and actually read in one of your reports, in your volunteer reports, that you talked a little bit about how difficult it was in general for women, even at the time when you were there, 2004 to 2007, how that was to work as a woman. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It was when I went actually 2002 for it was an international conference on reconstruction of Afghanistan with my husband, who is an engineer, and 2003, and then 2004 I started working in the parliament, reestablishing the parliament after 30 years of no parliament whatsoever. And we did hire a lot of young girls, young boys, all the young generation, and of course some other people, but they were also eager to work, so eager to come and help the country, because they were so deprived of all these things. Most of the girls were educated in not officially, but in private schools at nights and this and that, but The guys were mostly in war or working to support their families, feed their families. But overall, I mean, in general, they were all very happy to come out of their houses and start working and be part of the community, part of the progress in their country after being disabled for such a long time. And we had all kinds of trainings for them, of course, because they did not have enough experience. They did have education, higher education, university education, but the education at that time, I mean, it was not that great, but we had so many training programs for them, and they were all willing to learn. They were all going ahead. They would stay late. They would come early to the office and register for all kinds of training programs. So at that time, they were not afraid. There was a hope that came to them. There was a brightness that came into their lives. And that's why they were not afraid. I was there for 3 months all by myself alone in the wintertime. And I used to get out of my work and walk. And I was not afraid of anything because people were happy at that time. People saw that there is a magic that came to them and freed them from all those problems, from all those atrocities, from all those brutalities that they had before. So now they were happy. And so they wanted to do any kind of jobs. There were women coming to work, people who were not even educated. They had all kinds of other skills. They started working and helping their families, helping their community. This was the eagerness that came with that fall of Taliban to the people at that time.
Peggy, I'm sure you have something to add on this one. I think particularly about the hunger and being deprived for working so long and seeing all this potential not being used.
I know, exactly. And Tahira, let me say thank you for your service going back to Afghanistan and being a part of that. That's really beautiful the way you're describing, like a lightness. It's really quite remarkable because, you know, some 60% of girls did not have any opportunities at all. And my colleague, who's my friend, some girls were able to go to school by pretending that they were boys or going to underground schools. And then what happened during these last 20 years is this explosion of opportunities for women that they did not have before. And so the colleague that I'm talking about, her family helped to create a school for girls themselves. She herself was able to go to school in the US. She went to a top-notch university in the US, and now she has a very senior job at a leading organization working on issues of global development. And so her story is remarkable. And what she asked me to share with you is she was hoping to make a plea to women who are still in Afghanistan to keep fighting, because she said that she was educated because of other women leaders who really fought and worked underground to promote education and rights and opportunities for girls. And that's exactly what's happening right now. There's a network of safe houses within Kabul that people are able to go to. In particular, the women's rights issue has become so pronounced, and there are so many Afghan women who are so proud of the accomplishments, and they do not want these women's lives to be in peril, and they are. And so we have to get them out of the country or they will not be safe. But it's remarkable progress. Rarely do you see a country that increases so much in the rights and economic opportunities of women and in education of girls and women.
Yeah.
I think, Tahira, you might agree. Is that right, during your time there?
Oh, yes. The progress of women was really amazing. Not only women, everybody. Everybody was hungry for work, hungry for going ahead, hungry to make something of themselves. So women and children with education, with the possibilities that they had at their hands, they were very happy. The girls and the women they had so much chances to learn, to educate themselves in so many other fields. They were very good in technology, in science, in arts, music, sports, and everything. I mean, they were going ahead, and now they're even in the military. People are training in this, and I don't know if you have heard, one girl is a pilot, and I don't know where she lives, but I heard about that. All these successes that happened there is now it's after 20 years going down the drain. That's really heartbreaking.
Yes, it is. And I actually want to talk a little bit more about this in a moment, because I think we need to talk about it. So from the physical point, like what's the immediate things we need to do now, and then what's the impact, but then also I want to get to a little bit what's the psychological impact and the much more subtle impact actually in terms of how does it affect everyone. Naveed, you look like you had something.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one big difference between now and what happened before is that for the past 20 years or so, the Afghan children who have grown up have had these opportunities. So it's going to be really different for them to lose these opportunities. And from what I've seen, they're not going down quietly. They're in the streets marching. Unfortunately, the Taliban is retaliating against them. But that's why it's crucial for us to not just evacuate ourselves and our allies and give up. We need to continue to maintain some sort of diplomatic relationship with Afghanistan in order to make sure that human rights abuses and the things that the Taliban did before don't come back unchecked.
That's actually a very interesting point. I do want to ask you about the veterans at this stage here as well. So since 2001, I mean, there were a lot of people who served in the post 9/11 war operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Over half of them were deployed more than once. So there's a lot of injuries and trauma that also veterans have occurred during the war. What do you, from the veterans' point of view, what is right now the hardest for them to bear when they hear about the situation and when they see all these terrible things, what they literally, I mean, they've put their lives on the stake for that?
So it's really tough for a lot of my friends who have served in Afghanistan. I served in Iraq myself, but hearing from them over the past few days has been heartbreaking for us because it really, it was what we call a moral injury. Where we made promises to our Afghan allies when we were there that we were going to look out for them, we were going to protect them, that we were going to do everything we could. And when we said that, we were, writing a check with the full weight of the U.S. government behind it. And so now to see the way the situation has spiraled out of control, and I know that the President Biden's administration is doing everything they can now to rectify it. But at the same time, we wish these things, we had thought about this before, that we had been, smarter in the way we handled the evacuation and started it sooner and actually put them through the SIV or the special immigrant visa process more quickly than we have. For some of them it's taken years to get through it. And now, even now, as they're getting to the airport, through all the difficulties, once they get into the airport, they're being turned away, is what I'm hearing, that because their SIVs, special immigrant visas, have not yet been processed, which is absurd. At this point, we need to get everybody out and we can process them at another location, at a third country, or even here in the US or in Guam. We have military bases all over the world we could use as a clearinghouse for evacuees. But the first step needs to be get everybody out as quickly as we can.
Which means we have to speed up the SIV visa parts. And I know Peggy mentioned this before as well, that also for women, we need to see that there is a new category issued that we can get really quickly to enhance those visas. But Peggy, why is this actually even realistic at this point? I mean, hearing Naveed now when he says even the regular SIV visas took really, really long, is this realistic for us to think about? That would be a choice for, we could actually instigate a new category for the SIV visa?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's called the Humanitarian Parole visa, and it exists. And there have been a number of members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, that have been championing this. And I think that's part of the reason why, when the administration speaks, they're speaking now more broadly about categories of people whose lives are at risk. So Senator Markey of Massachusetts, Senator Murray of Connecticut, Kristen Gillibrand of New York, Susan Collins of Maine. All of these folks have been very, very actively involved in arguing for this special humanitarian parole visa. And this is similar to any kind of an emergency refugee situation where you want to expand the categories of visa so that we cut down on the bureaucracy and can get people out of the country whose lives are in danger. This is really urgent that we support this.
Yeah.
So anyone who's listening to this, I would suggest you call your representative to encourage them to expand refugee status for people whose lives are in danger or who served in Afghanistan, and also to expand the humanitarian parole visa. So there are a lot of important efforts that are happening, Nicolette, that are really quite urgent, but they're very promising. So it is working well on our end. There are many people who it's almost impossible to fathom in 2021 that basic human rights would be so in danger as this, but it shows us how far we have to go. And I'm sure you feel this way, Tahira, and all of the other people on the show, that to imagine that a particular type of person is less than everyone else and is like chattel and does not have the basic rights of education and economic opportunity, or even to leave their home, is just almost unfathomable. It's like a medieval sense of different classes of human beings. So it goes against our most fundamental sense of human rights. So I encourage everybody to stand up for this right now.
Yeah.
And it is possible, Nicole. We have to believe it's possible.
Excuse me, can I ask one question?
Sure.
I have a lady who used to work for me and is still working in the parliament as a press director. She's a journalist. She's the press director, and she applied online for SIV. But the only thing that she couldn't get, as soon as the Taliban got in, the offices were closed, nobody was working. She could not get her HR letter. So can she do without the HR?
The question you're asking, Tahira, which is so interesting because you were a member of Congress, is what every single person is asking. What can we do? And there's no clear answers for that, except that there is an underground network there in country that is trying to support people. But the question of visa status and getting visas is really, really, really difficult. I think, hats off to our veteran who's on this call. I frankly think that a lot of former military who are in the country, U.S. military, are really helping with this and going around formal channels. I don't know if our colleague wants to answer in any way, but I think that is happening.
Yeah, there are a number of groups who are coordinating efforts on this issue on the ground, and both on the ground in Kabul and here back in the States.
How will people find out about that, though, Naveed?
So we're sending everybody to visit the website evacuateourallies.org. That's where you can go to see what we're working on now. There's a lot of resources there. You can find ways, if you're here in America, if you're in the States, there are places you can donate both supplies and money to help the folks who are making it through the process and getting here. There have been a few flights so far. And then there's also ways where you can help the folks who are on the ground still in Afghanistan and Kabul who need support as they're trying to get out.
Yeah. Tahira, a question for you. So if people here in the United States have these types of things that they can do, and I suppose that people who actually still have families in Afghanistan and so on, what is the status of communication right now that the families here have with members over there? Can some of these activities, like for example, this is what you need to do, this is where you would need to go, can that be communicated in a way that it doesn't kill you, when it's caught up, but you still get the information across?
The problem is, so far it was okay that we could call, we could send emails. Now a lot of them are complaining that because everything is getting so expensive, they cannot even get the card for their mobile phones or the internet. A lot of times they don't have electricity there. So things are getting harder for us to. We wanted, for instance, we used to send money to our families, to people in need, stuff like that. Now offices or companies, whatever you call, they were transferring money. They are not transferring money. Western Union is stopped working. I don't know, some other one stopped working. The banks in Afghanistan are closed. So there is no way to help them in any way. I don't know what will happen in the future for them. Everything is getting so expensive also.
Right.
So there is no work, there are no banks open, nobody can send money. The organizations, even the organizations, when they ask for money and donations, I don't know how they would send money.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I've heard from Peggy and our other guests on this, is that there is just no clear, path to this, and that's one thing. A veterans group, a coalition, including Common Defense and quite a few other veterans organizations around America, are writing a letter to President Biden this week that is going to ask him to centralize all this information, make it easier to get it out, get all the right information out, and also to commit to making sure that we don't stop until all of our people are out of the country. Right now, we have 9 days left to get everybody out, according to the previous August 31st deadline.
Yeah.
And that's just not enough time.
And I was going to say, when we talk about we're going to write a letter this week, so if you're in the country, that means 7 days. That's a long time frame when you actually, have no idea, I mean, literally how long you've got until you get picked up.
Right. Yeah, and so the letter actually should be going out Monday. Hopefully it won't take a whole week, but still, it's the demands that we're making in there are to really move quickly on this, and we're already running out of time. And the people on the ground there who are suffering and unable to get through the crowds and the Taliban checkpoints, they don't have any time at all.
And what happens after the 90s? Sorry.
Excuse me, say that again, please repeat that.
And what happens after the 90s? When the 90s is over and the United States doesn't help anybody anymore, what happens?
No, that's absolutely right. That's the question that's being asked. President Biden, I believe, earlier today in his speech said that we would be committed to staying until a little bit later on, once our, beyond the deadline. But we need a clear commitment to what that means, how long we're going to stay, how many people we want to get out before we leave completely, and really what that is going to look like on the ground. And more importantly, no matter what that ends up being, the deadline or the extension, if we don't have a clear process in place, then it's going to be a mess anyway. So we need to get a process in place first.
Okay, so let me summarize here. So we got 2 organizations that we already heard of that we do ask you at home, please, to actually go to the site and act on that. One was the
Evacuate our allies.
Evacuate our allies. And then the other one was, Peggy, you mentioned that?
Yeah, it's called protectafghanwomen.org.
That's right.
Protectafghanwomen.org.
Protectafghanwomen.org. So those are 2 starting places that we do need people to go to, obviously. And then also, Tahira, are there any other information that, for example, people in the Afghan community, just in our area, for example, can get other information in terms of all these different activities that are going on the ground? We heard about a network of safe houses, for example. I'm sure, are people like through the grapevine talking about these?
In the United States,
okay.
You mean? Yes, they are willing to help the groups that are coming in.
Yeah.
They are angry about the support of, I don't know, this is getting political, Pakistan. They are always asking for sanction in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Or bringing justice to people in Afghanistan. Because we know that Taliban themselves could not do what they did now. There must have been some deals behind the curtains that made everybody so angry that all of a sudden nobody wants to fight, and the Taliban were not that well equipped. And where did they get the equipment to come and enter the country? And with so many military personnel that were trained, as Mr. Biden always say, then why? We all think, and everybody in the community think, that there was a deal. So this deal, if this deal was something for Taliban to come so easily into Afghanistan, then this deal should have included the people of Afghanistan, what happens to their lives? What happened to the progress they had in 20 years? What happened to the hopes and of the kids, of the children? What? They just forget about the rest of the people and the country and just make this deal with the Taliban to come in peacefully? And they didn't come peacefully. They killed a lot of people. They killed a lot of people in many different places. Even the people who submitted to them, they executed them. We hear all these things from our friends, communities, news of Afghanistan. I have a comment to make right now. We have a saying in Farsi that says, you help people climb up the roof and then take the ladder from under their feet. This is what happened. International community all swarmed into Afghanistan, promoting democracy, encouraging education and this and that. And then when they are on the right path, they leave them.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we were talking about earlier with what American troops are going through now, is that over the past 20 years, we fought, and we died, and our friends, gave everything on the soil there in Afghanistan. And to what end? If the Taliban were able to take over the country with such swiftness, what gains did we really make? All these reports that we got from generals and even from members of Congress and previous presidents who said that we were winning. What were we winning? And how? And so that's something that we are also asking for a full accounting, not just over the decisions that President Biden has made in the recent months, but actually over the past 20 years. What actually happened in Afghanistan? Where did all the trillions of dollars that we spent go?
That's right.
And really, how did this happen? And why did the American public was so unaware of what was going on?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a wake-up moment that everybody experienced from all different angles. We see that from planning for strategies, for gender strategies going out. We see that from the military. We see this when you actually join the military and then you become a veteran. You see this. We see this when you stay by. When you actually look at the numbers, they're staggering. Over $2 trillion, 2,448 people, troops that died, U.S. contractors, 3,848. Afghan National Police and military, 66,000, and the list goes on and the list goes on. I think what that does show, and it seems that there is overall more of a culture that people actually are waking up a little bit more to a different reality. I think it puts the whole idea of war in the first place very much in question. But then I think it also says that people need to be more involved in the decision making from the get-go, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And one point I want to quickly make too is that, as you mentioned, 66,000 Afghan military folks have died, and that's more than the more Afghan military folks died in 1 year than American troops have in 20 years.
Yes.
So to say that they gave up or to say that they didn't fight is also inaccurate. I want to be clear that whatever happened on the ground, whatever the situation was that allowed the Taliban to come in so swiftly, the Afghan army and the Afghan military did not just give up. They had to make decisions as well, and they also were. If America wasn't prepared, neither were they.
Yeah. I want to talk to you for a moment about other options that women or people who need to have the country to get out probably do. So if they do not make a plane, are there actually any other options? I mean, what about neighboring countries? I know Pakistan is very difficult. And then to what avail? I mean, we do know, it's very murky in both sides. But what are other options? Who wants to take a stab?
Tahira, I mean, you go ahead. You want to go ahead?
Yeah. Well, other options is to travel to the safer countries like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. Iran already said they do not accept anybody because they have their own problems. But we talk to our families, to our friends. They say that it's extremely expensive to go to those places. Who will help them there? Would the United Nations help? Will the United States help?
Yeah. And that's the issue. It's the money is the issue, of course. It's then how do you go across? And then if you travel with families and children.
Yeah. The visas to those places are so expensive. Like, for instance, a visa to Uzbekistan for one person is 4,000 Afghanis, which a lot of people don't have that much salary. And they have families of at least 6 people in every family. How can they afford that?
And that's exactly what I think what Peggy mentioned earlier is after the Vietnam War ended, we brought almost 130,000 refugees from that area, part of the world, over here. And that's exactly what we need to do again now. We need to be prepared that this is not going to be a small group of folks. There are thousands of people who relied on us,
did.
and we made promises to them, and so we need to fulfill those promises. And the thing is, this is not a political issue either. I believe earlier in the spring, 30 senators, 15 Democrats and 15 Republicans wrote a letter asking President Biden to expedite this process. And you know, the Senate being what it is, Congress does have the authority, and there's bipartisan support for this because of folks like Representative Crow, who served in Afghanistan. There's also Peter Mayer, who's a veteran as well. And so because of the military folks on both sides of the aisle who served, leading the way, there is bipartisan support to bring these folks here immediately and not leave them stranded in another country. What I'm hearing reports already is that the folks who have made it to Qatar, they get to the airport, they have no idea what's going to happen next. They have no money, they have no papers, and no plan. And we can't abandon them, in another place. We promised them safety. We need to bring them here and give them that safety.
Yeah, it does come with a responsibility, and that's the human responsibility. That's really where people have to come together. I mean, there's no. It doesn't matter where you stand. This isn't a political issue anymore. And actually, when you look at what the government has been doing or has not been doing, I think what all of these activities and these efforts show is that there is a lot of self-organized activities going on, that people get together and do something to help much faster than it seems that there's anything coming from the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. There's been an incredible upsurge, and I think it's so interesting to hear how veterans are involved, and then also it's really a bipartisan support because this is a humanitarian crisis, and this doesn't happen all the time. So this rises above the normal conversations around immigration and fears about that. And it seems as if that was one of the fears the administration was thinking about when they started this in such a small way. But what I'm hearing is an upswell of bipartisan support for making a special exception for Afghan refugees. And then just in my own neighborhood, there's so many efforts that are already happening. People are saying, I'll take in families I want to support. And so I do think it is similar to a post-war situation where we need to think on a magnitude much, much greater to support refugees in a really different way. And, I feel optimistic that will happen. I do agree with what you're saying, Tahira and Naveed, that it's a very short window. I mean, we really literally have a matter of days to try to save lives in this situation. And many are thinking, many who are still there are thinking we have to wait and see how the Taliban respond, but we know what the Taliban are like. And Tahira, you can speak much more specifically to that. And Naveed, I'm sure many of your colleagues can as well, but we're talking about really serious assassinations and imprisonments and torturing, and we're talking about very, very serious situation that we need to all feel a humanitarian response is what is needed, and it rises above political party.
Yeah, what I'm seeing from folks is that Taliban is saying that we welcome women to serve in our government, and we welcome women to get an education under whatever Sharia law allows. I don't know what that means.
I was going to say, you believe that?
But I don't believe it. What I feel is that what they're saying is, you can do whatever you want. And then as soon as we leave, they're going to be like, well,
that's right.
Now the gloves are going to come off. And that's, we really don't have much time to waste on this. But part of this is that if there was some sort of agreement through back channels, if there is any sort of diplomatic negotiations going on, then a major part of that should be that America is going to maintain some sort of presence, whether it's an embassy or a council, and that we're going to continue to hold the Taliban as now the ruling government of Afghanistan, if that's the case, to the same human rights standards that we would hold to ourselves and to other countries who are part of the community of nations.
So just to reiterate this again, because really days do matter, time matters and days matter. So please, if you're watching now, we go to those two organizations or to those two web pages and help with the support, look it up, see what you can do. I think that's really, really important. I want to talk for a little bit here and shift gears a little bit and talk about the medium and long-term impact on people, which we haven't talked about. So, and I think when you look at, and that actually goes for both. So I think there is a component that goes to the veterans, and we'll get there in a moment. I think there's a component that goes for the women and the girls. When you think about this, we've just been catapulted back from 2021 to the 6th century. You've had women and girls who had actually prospects in life. They had a vision of the future. They had an idea. There's all this potential, that eagerness to learn, and suddenly it's really just coming down. It's like it's in crashing colors. What do you think, Peggy, will this do to the psyche, to the emotional stability of the women, and then to the girls?
Mm-hmm. I think Naveed mentioned this, and Tahira did as well, is that there's a new generation that grew up with this light that Tahira talked about. There's this new generation that grew up being exposed to science and engineering and poetry and the arts. And so it's very different than it was, I think maybe, Tahira, than when you entered Parliament and went back to Afghanistan. And Naveed, you have said there are people in the streets protesting. And so I think there's a huge force of people, particularly women and girls, that will not go back. They will not go back. And so they are going to fight. They're going to fight for their rights. And my sense of the women's movement and women's organizations in this country is they will be very actively involved in advocating for that. And so I think this goes beyond just U.S. support. I think there are a number of other countries, Canada, Germany, others, who are looking at Afghanistan now as a place where we cannot let women's rights and girls' rights go backwards. And so I do think there's going to be a fight. How that will unfold is hard to say, and but I think people won't go backwards.
Yeah.
Do you think, so Tahira, what do you think what Peggy said? Do you think this is a different generation? Do you think they will take up the fight?
Definitely they are different generation. Some of them I have heard that they would rather die than to accept the things that they are going to force on them. Did you know that in the back 20 years ago, the ladies or the girls did not have the right to go to a hospital for treatment? They were not allowed to be seen or treated by a male doctor. They were not allowed to be seen on the street. Even a little bit of their shoes shown, they would beat them on the streets. These things, what they have done, and they are that brutal, they will do it again, and nobody is going to trust them because that's the way they are. We don't trust them.
And you know, one thing I can actually see totally, when you have so much bottled up energy, it actually is, it can channel a tremendous force. When you say, like, it's like when you've seen, for example, the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly, the butterfly is never going to go back to a caterpillar, right? So when you really look at this, there's a tremendous force. So what could we do, though, to support women on the ground past August 31st? What can be done? How can we organize? How can other women actually support and help? How can we show the solidarity for the women and the girls? How can we give the efforts in there?
Yeah, I love that question. And Tahira, you can jump in as well, please. You know, I think, Nicolette, you encourage us to sort of go underneath the surface of the issues, and in the show you encourage people to do that. And, you know, frankly, it completely confounds me to think about what is going on in the minds of the Taliban in terms of sheltering and oppressing women to such an extent in this day and age. And I know that there are fundamentalists and there's a movement for this across the world, but it's very difficult for me to understand how that is sustainable. And when you look at what the country is going through right now, all the banks are closed, there's no electricity, people, all of the shops are closed. How can they survive? How can they create a new government? One, without half of the population, and two, there's this mismatch between what they're saying about becoming a part of international society and then their past behavior. And to this point, Tahira, I wanted to ask you about the point Nicolette made about treating women according to Sharia law. What can you tell us a little bit about to what extent Islamic law actually endorses the oppression of women and girls?
Well, they are making it too much. Islamic law is, we grew up in that country. We had a mild way of religion activities. I grew up there. I never wore a burqa. I never wore scarf. I went to school, to college. I was in sports. I was in a music course and stuff like that. But we had our own patterns of practicing our religion. Nobody forced us to do this or to do that. These people are forcing everybody. They're forcing that you have to wear this long black dress or whatever, and you're not allowed. One of my cousins said that she will not go back to college. She's in college. I said, why not? She said, because they told us that you have to cover all the way your body, and even the burqa that cover your face. You should not show your face. How can you go to college and cover up all yourself, all your body and your eyes and your face and still go? She said, I would rather give up my education than to go under that circumstances, under that condition. So I don't know what their Sharia law is. The way I see it, their Sharia law is made of themselves. Their religion is not our religion. They are extremists. And we never were extremists. Religion in our time was much stronger. Our beliefs, our hearts. It's not just cover yourself and do whatever you're allowed to do, kill people, don't let them go to education or the schools or stuff. Our Prophet Muhammad said that your education is from the day you're born to the day you die, for men and women. It's not that these people are creating some other Sharia law, which we are not familiar with this completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the situation is dire for them, and I think I talked a little bit about what we need to do beyond the deadline. We need to stay and maintain those relationships and continue to have some sort of diplomatic relationship with whoever the government ends up being in Kabul. But what we also need to do is look at what happened and how we got there for the last 20 years.
Yep.
And there is actually legislation in Congress that was introduced earlier this year called the National Security Powers Act. And if you're going to call your congressman, about this, mention that as well, because what that does is makes it so that future presidents can't unilaterally send our troops into places like Afghanistan and Iraq and make these forever wars last, for 20 years without any oversight again. Yeah. It requires Congress to have oversight, exercise that authority, and make sure that if we're spending trillions of dollars and sending thousands of troops, that we're doing it for the right reasons, and we have a plan to exit as well and not have this mess happen again.
That actually seems to me also a key piece in terms of recruiting or convincing future people who want to join, or were previously interested in joining the military. But I think at this point, it really becomes a question. I know my son actually was interested, but now we're actually rethinking it. So yeah. It's and that's I think there's a backlash. So there's also the part of how do we reestablish trust, and that's not just trust in the United States in keeping the promises, but this is also trust in our own institutions and trust in our own approach and how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, for the Vietnam War was a draft, and that's why the American public was invested, and that's why as that war dragged on, public sentiment towards it became more and more negative until we finally were, the public forced the government to act and pull us out of Vietnam, because millions of American boys were put in the draft lottery and had to go over there. Now with these post 9/11 wars, it's an all volunteer system. So the only people who go, usually, I'm like an anomaly. I'm the only one in my family who served. But for most families, like my wife's family, both of her parents and now my brother-in-law have served in the military. What we're seeing now is like a warrior class. It becomes a family business almost. And so the average American does not know anybody who serves in the military, let alone know somebody who served in Afghanistan. And so when you're insulated like that, when it's not part of your daily life, and not affecting anyone you know, and the media is not talking about it for the last 20 years, then it really just feels like something that's going on somewhere else and has nothing to do with you. But the fact is, when voters go to the polls for every election, they're voting to put in people in power who can have a choice. They can either exert their oversight authority and make sure that where we're spending money and giving up American lives, and we're doing it for the right reasons, or they can ignore it and go about their business.
So that seems to me actually that purpose is not just a word that is shaping in how we do business going forward, but purpose obviously also looks at what's the purpose of wherever we're going in. And then we have only 2 minutes left, so I want to do this really quick because time flies. But we haven't talked about the sustainability for gender equality going forward. Obviously, Peggy, it's really difficult to sort of have a sustainable strategy when you have areas where you have cultural difference, different values, etc. Very, very quickly, what are some key things we can consider about that going forward?
We are losing half of the energy of the world if we continue to hold women back. And there is no sustainability without women. Women are key decision makers in every household and need to be invested in for any kind of progress in the world, and are critical to sustainability of Afghanistan and really to every country on the planet. We are a force to be reckoned with, and I think this is what you will see. People fighting back in Afghanistan is one place where we can see that if you try to hold women back, it's not possible to do so anymore.
Yeah, Naveed, any final word? Has to be quick.
No, I just wanted to say, visit evacuateourallies.org, and you can hopefully give us some help in this digital Dunkirk that we're trying to pull off.
Yes, and I actually do want to mention one thing, because Tahira, when you described there's this hunger for women to actually go out, it was so palpable that I really think this is the one thing when we go forward we really all need to consider and push and really stand up for that, because there is no sustainability without that force that has been bottled up for so long. Thank you, all of you, for being with us tonight. It's great to have you on. And thank you for watching. And we will actually you can go to our Facebook page. I'll also send out the tweets. You can go to those websites and organizations, and please provide your support, because there is no time to lose. Have a good night, but don't go to sleep before you actually go to those places. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.